What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Devy YouTube channel. We made it here on the top 25 college football series. Number one, Ohio State is who we're breaking down today. Now, number one based on ESPN, not my rankings as a Michigan fan. Sorry, Ohio State fans. But we're going to be diving into what that looks like, what the depth chart, looks like, and that quarterback battle. We're going to be definitely talking about that. We have still not had any inclination of what Ryan Day is going to do there. So we're just going to do our best there and talk about it. But dive into the schedule. What could they be? Can they go back to the playoff? Can they contend for another national title? We're going to cover it all here on the channel. So hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and we'll dive into the Ohio State Buckeyes on the other side of the intro. All right. If we're going to talk about Ohio State, we got to talk about last year. Obviously they had the high expectations. CJ Stroud, everybody coming back, JSN, everybody there. Then they lost JSN pretty much for the year. They finished 11-2. Their two losses were to Michigan again, in a game that really wasn't close after the second half. I mean, they were in it, and then obviously Michigan kind of pulled away there. Then you had Georgia, where they should have beat Georgia. They were probably a targeting non-call away from beating Georgia and probably winning a national title. That's how close they were. They were out Travion Henderson. So honestly, I thought they were the best team in college football last year. I'll be honest. I thought talent-wise, especially on the offensive side, they were the best team in college football. They just didn't win it, right? And I think that's a Ryan Day thing that we'll talk about. But overall, you have to like what they did. They were second in the nation in points per game. Their opponents' points per game, they were 24th. That defense was better last year. So we did see an improvement on that defense with a new defensive coordinator. So now we're talking about the next year, right? We know they're going to have the talent. Where does that look like? And what does that look like on the offensive line?
So that's the problem. That's the main problem with this team. So they are only returning their two guards this year. They lost both tackles, Dwan Jones and Paris Johnson, and they lost Luke Whippler. And those are three very key pieces of that offensive line. They were, Paris Johnson was the top 3 pick, top 4 pick or whatever. I don't know what the Cardinals drafted, top 6 pick, who knows? Top 10 for sure. Luke Whippler has been playing really well, and Dwan Jones has been playing really well in the NFL. And so now it's nice to have the two guards back in Donovan Jackson and Matt Jones. I think Donovan Jackson looks like a potential, key piece. But now you've got a lot of question marks. This Josh Simmons kid coming over from San Diego State didn't really play well last year. And, I think you mentioned the Athletic is projecting that he's going to be the starting left tackle. Josh Fryer kicks over to right tackle. This could be the problem. And this could also be part of the reason why we don't know the quarterback situation, because I'm not certain that the pass protection is really going to be there like it has been in the past.
Yeah, to Christian's point, if Ohio State fans, before you start yelling at us about the offensive line here, projection-wise, they have said that Simmons looks so good, he kind of was entrenched there. Fryer was at the left tackle position, but it looks like Simmons' athleticism has pushed him over to the left tackle with Fryer at the right tackle so far. That's what we've been hearing based on just kind of what's going on in camp. But yeah, to your point, this could be that weak link, right? And I think that last year that was their strength. That was one of the best areas that they had. As far as their depth chart, okay, we know they have talent everywhere, but it's the quarterback position. We got Kyle McCord versus Devin Brown, and it really is tied. Based on everything that we have seen, many people thought McCord was coming in and being the guy, but it seems like what's going to happen is this thing's going to go into week 1, and basically it's going to be how they play on the field, and I think that's really going to determine it. And maybe like Christian talked about that offensive line, who gives them the best chance to win. I know me and him both like Devin Brown. We were big Devin Brown fans on here, but because I do think he has the athleticism. I think that he has an arm. I think that he's just got that it factor to me. But I do think he also has that I'm going to throw 3 picks factor as well that Day's not going to like. Whereas McCord might be more of that hey, just going to toss the ball around. We're going to get to Marvin Harrison Jr. I'm not going to take too many risks that I don't need to. Where do you see this kind of playing out?
Who knows, man? Devin Brown was my QB1 in his class last year. And so I hope that he steps up and wins this. But, we've seen Kyle McCord and what he's been able to do. I think he had to play a little bit a couple of years ago, and it wasn't great, and I think if he hasn't taken steps forward, then I think that's why this is quite the competition. But a lot of people are saying, well, they haven't named a quarterback. Maybe they're not playing well. Ryan Day kind of insinuated a couple of days ago that this is a true battle, and they have
Yeah.
each had their days. They've each had, days where they haven't played very well. This reminds me of the Georgia quarterback battle, though, because I think you're right. I think McCord is more the Carson Beck. He's going to take what's there. He's going to take care of the ball a little bit. And Devin Brown's more the Brock Vandegrift, though I think Devin Brown's ceiling is much higher. And I do think there's some value in going with the younger kid, knowing that you always have a championship window at Ohio State. But if you go with the young kid and can develop him for 2 years, I think that window is a lot more open in 2024, when he's returning as a starter, instead of McCord maybe being a one and doneer, or losing that battle next year.
Yeah. And if McCord leaves, like if that happened and McCord put himself in the transfer or whatever, we've seen that happen. They got Tristan Gebbia from Oregon State. And then Lincoln Keenholz is actually, they've talked about him just slinging it in camp, and they like him a lot too. So it's not like it'd be a loss, but it's not like something that they can't overcome there. I will say this, from the running back position, they're very talented there. I love TreVeyon Henderson. I think people forget about how good TreVeyon Henderson is after that foot injury last year. He is one of the best backs in the country, if not the best back in the country. Mayan Williams is fine. I told Christian I wasn't going to say that, but Mayan Williams is fine. He's a fine backup running back there. DeMontre Trayon, he came out. He's playing running back now. I like Dallin Hayden more than some. I think that he does show a lot of positive traits, and I think he is a very good runner. And Hayden could be that next guy up next year. I think he's very in line for that. Evan Pryor is fine, but I like Hayden more. And then we got the wide receiver room. They just got dudes everywhere. It's just 5-star, 5-star, 5-star. Big fan of Marvin Harrison Jr. Carnell Tate has a chance. I saw Ohio State beat reporter talked about how Tate, like a hot take, he could have over 600-700 yards this year. Maybe that's how talented they have him. Julian Fleming just hanging around. That guy's just sticking on this roster, but very going to be probably just a solid piece for them. Emeka Egbuka, based on the metrics, looks like he might be one of the better wide receivers in this room, even over Marvin Harrison Jr., even though Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be a top 5 pick. And then they have tight ends they don't use. Cade Stover, Drew G. Scott, all those guys that they haven't really used historically. But this room is just loaded.
Yeah. It's tough to even talk about this room because there's just so much talent. You got through that entire list, and Brandon Inniss is my wide receiver 1 going into this year.
Yeah.
And I think Carnell Tate being there for a little bit longer, Inniss wasn't an early enrollee, I don't think. So he's a little behind, but it sounds like from fall camp, he is just balling all over the field. That looks more like a down the road type of play. Jaden Ballard is a good player too, man. Like Noah Rogers apparently is making plays all over the place too. There's just a ton of talent here, and that's why this quarterback battle is being made out to be this big thing. All they have to do is play point guard. Like all these dudes are going to be wide open all the time, especially with this Ohio State offense. So just get the ball to them, and I think whoever is doing that the most is going to win out eventually.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the big losses they had with CJ, Paris Johnson, the offensive lineman, like we've talked about, Luke, DeJuan, JSN, and then JSN didn't really play last year. But yeah, if he would have played, they would have won a national title. Like these are the things that you talk about with how talented they were. This was a big group they lost. I really feel like this was Ohio State's best chance last year to win a national title because I thought they were the most talented. CJ was a very, very good quarterback that was up and down. I mean, Ohio State fans will know that. I feel like he did play up and down. But against Georgia, he played one of the best games I've seen him play, and that was his ceiling and what he had. But yeah, notable losses on the offensive side.
For sure. I mean, it's really tough to, recover from losing a top 3 quarterback, and that's a lot of the conversation that we're having. Jackson Smith and Jigba, you're right. Like I think it's a notable loss, but also there is no better program for a plug and play replacement than this one in terms of especially a slot receiver like Jackson. And I know he was more than that. Don't get mad at me, Ohio State fans, but there are a lot of guys that I think could fill that production role on this team, and they kind of already did last year.
Yeah, 100%. When you're looking at the recruits, they just get guys. It's number 4 overall rank in the 2023 class. They did a good job of going around. Ohio, they had 8 guys. Florida, Georgia, kind of moved it around a little bit. Carnell Tate's the big one, number 3 wide receiver out of Florida, out of IMG, really good. Brandon Inniss again, Noah Rogers. So they just go get wide receivers. So you're going to notice that. I was a big fan of Noah. I thought Noah Rogers is kind of getting slept on in this class because of Inniss and Tate. Noah's a very, very solid prospect. Even Thurman, tight end, I I mean, again, legacy kid. I think that looking at him, what he can do, very, very solid prospect as well. Luke Montgomery, they just kind of get those interior offensive linemen, then they just plug and play. You see that. They went after linemen and tackles, and you could see you could tell they needed to shore up that offensive line, and that's something that they did with this class. Bryson Rogers was in there as well. He's someone that people don't even talk about at all. So overall, they did a great job with this class, and Lincoln is one of those guys, those recruits that they're going to really need. I think Lincoln's going to be that next guy up, especially when they lose Dylan Raiola and those other guys.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it depends on who wins this year, because if they go with McCord, I think they lose Devin Brown, and then Knowles has an opportunity next year. This big three of wide receivers, though, I think they immediately step in as either redshirt freshmen or sophomores and are productive in the absence of Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka. I think they overtake last year's class pretty easily, and I just think they walk onto the field, and that's the window we're talking about, right? Because if one of these three guys is as good as what they've had, I think this offense is just going to consistently be one of the best in the country. They do a good job. That's why we're talking about them last in our top 25 countdown.
Yeah. And I would say this, like, Tate is talented enough to make the Marvin Harrison Jr. loss not hurt as much. Like, it was still hurt, but it's crazy that he's going to step in there and these guys can step in there. And it's like, yeah, we had Marvin Harrison Jr., one of the best prospects that we've seen in a long time at wide receiver position. Oh, yeah, but it's okay. We got these three guys. They're going to step in and do fine. I think that is the level of prospects that they have on this roster. Key transfers, the big one was, like we talked about, Josh Simmons, because of his move over there. They're going to really, really need him to kind of step up. I don't know why Tristan Gebbia came to Ohio State. I guess just to kind of maybe win a national title. So shout out him. I like that. Victor Cutler. They did get a kicker though. Casey Magyar. They've talked about him as being kind of that guy from Kent State. So overall, fine class. Josh Simmons is really the big one.
Yeah. I hope he improves from that. Like I said, he didn't really play well last year. So that's one of the shocking developments out of camp, is that, he's coming into his own. And I think the Ohio State coaching is probably a little better than at San Diego State. So sounds like the athleticism wins out, and that's what they need from their tackles. They need an athletic dude. So it seems like that's a good fit for him. We talked about, Clemson not hitting the portal for guys like this. This could be an impactful thing if he goes out there and is really, really good for them. That's why you hit the portal for offensive linemen.
Yeah, no, that's what you do. And I think the thing is, like, Victor Cutler, these guys coming from these smaller schools, it just shows you how much, like, teams that need offensive line help. Like, that is the number one thing in the portal teams went after. And they actually, like a program like Ohio State was going after some of these G5 linemen because they need them that bad. I think that is just something to note. Impact players, we know. I just put Kyle McCord, Devin Brown, because whoever starts is going to be an impact player because he's thrown to that guy, Marvin Harrison Jr. Then we have Emeka Egbuka as well. I think TreVeyon Henderson can get over 1,000 yards and kind of solidify himself as kind of that running back one in the class. But yeah, these all are their impact players, and they're absolutely phenomenal.
It's crazy to me that I actually believe that TreVeyon Henderson is the most impactful player on this roster right now.
Yeah.
And just not the most talented by any means, but I think we saw what that offense was with a lesser running game last year. And I think that with the new quarterbacks, they are going to need to lean on that running game a little bit more. And then we talked about the pass protection too. So I think TreVeyon needs to come back healthy. I really want to see it. There's been so many doubters that I start to like question if I'm seeing things correctly. And then I watch him play and I'm like, oh yeah, still an elite player. So I'm excited to watch this whole group play this year.
Yeah, 100%. No, I agree with you too. I will say on the defensive side, so we're going to slip over there. Jim Knowles came in and he did make some improvements. He had that 4-2-5 look going on, but there were times where they got gashed. Michigan and Georgia kind of exposed them a little bit. Both those teams averaged 43 points, 8.9 yards per play allowed in those two games. That's not good enough. And I think that's an area that, they needed to fix. But Knowles came in and did fix a lot. I just don't think he had the time to fix everything that there. I think the biggest thing for me that stood out when I was doing my research through this is that, Ohio State is ranked outside the top 30 in sacks per game for 3 straight seasons. That defensive line has not done a good job, and the defensive line has only accounted for 68% and 64% of those team sacks in the last 3 years. They just haven't done a good job. And with Larry Johnson's crew that he's got there, it was 2022 and 2020 was the 2 of the 3 worst seasons ever for sacks production rise under Larry Johnson in the 9 years he's been there. So they really got to be able to produce sacks and get that pressure there. I mean, they have JT, so it'll help. But when you're looking at overall, they really got to find a way to get as a quarterback.
Yeah, JT Tuimoloau, he took a step forward last year, and I think he's earning some first round discussion, and I think that's right. They need a lot more from Jack Sawyer. I think this has been a top recruit. He got on the field a bit last year, and I think another step from him really helps that out. Michael Hall is a nice interior penetrator. I think that he's going to be able to get some sack production as well. Tommy Eichenberg was one of my favorite players when I thought he was coming out last year. I think he had like 5 or 6 sacks last year as well. So, I mean, I think that there's the pieces are there to improve in getting to the pass rusher or the quarterback. I mean, but the problem is this defense doesn't really lend itself to that unless you're doing, crazy things, blitzing your linebackers and things like that. So overall, though, this defense, Sonny Styles is drawing some lofty comparisons. We have him projected to start in the slot here. He's really a safety, but he's sticking with slot receivers as well, and Ohio State slot receivers as well. It sounds like he's the next big thing on that defense. They need a guy like that. They haven't had a guy that they can say, oh, that's a blue chip player right there in quite a while. Tuimoloau was like the closest thing last year, and he was up and down. So
yeah,
returning 73% of the defense, this group is going to be what drives them to a college football playoff berth, I think. I don't necessarily think that it's the offense. I think it's this returning group that should be a lot better this year.
Yeah, no, I agree too. I think that if they take that next step and this defensive line can get after you, no team is going to be able to beat them. Like it just because of their offense and what they have. I think that is the key. Notable losses: they lost Zach Harrison, Mitchell as well, Jalen Johnson, and Javonte Jean Baptiste. He left to Notre Dame. I say notable. Yeah, they were good, but I do think that this group next coming up is more, I think it's more complete. So like, yeah, these notable losses are out there. These are guys that, are in the NFL or whatever they have it. But that defensive line and that defense, I feel like coming back, they're probably just as solid as they were last year, if not better.
Yeah, I think another one, potentially Ronnie Hickman. I know he didn't go super high in the draft last year, but been playing well. And all these Ohio State kids have been playing really well in the preseason, which kind of speaks to the problems with that defense last year, right? Because, if these guys, Zach Harrison, I'm not sure, I haven't kept tabs on him, but I think overall you're right. Like I think this group is better than that group, despite having some notable losses here.
Yeah. And when you look at the recruits, so when you talk about this, we always make fun of like, there's a joke like, oh, is another wide receiver? Can that wide receiver play cornerback or whatever the case may be? Like there is that when we're talking about recruiting, but they did a good job here. Malik Hartford is a very, very solid prospect, number 5 at his position at safety. Jason Moore is a big one, 6'6", 280. I mean, number 10 overall at his position. I know he was very, very sought after out of DeMatha Catholic. They really liked this kid at defensive line. And then Joshua Mickens, Jermaine Matthews, like they did a good job of filling it. Obviously, it's not a lot of guys. So when we're talking about like just overall volume, it's always going to be on the offensive side. But I do think they did a good job of getting athletes.
Yeah. Overall, this is a good class. Again, I think this is the type of group that they need to kind of refill and kind of fill in their defense. But none of these guys are really going to be pushing for playing time this year, I don't think, because of that returning group and because of, how high I think the ceiling of this defense is. I don't think they're going to need many of these guys. So overall, good class, but I think they're going to have to hit defense a little harder here in the future if they want to keep competing. I think that's been their Achilles heel, right? They're getting gashed by Michigan offenses that are running heavy personnel and just running the ball down their throats. And I don't see a whole lot of, a couple interior players, 3 interior players. They need some more edge rushers, I think. But overall, good class. It's Ohio State, of course.
I will say, like the edge thing, like one thing I noticed by doing these, like the top 10 teams, they really target edges and they go after edges hard. And Ohio State, yeah, they got Joshua Mickens, these guys, but like top guys, like I don't see that as much. So like that is something to kind of know when you're looking at the recruiting style. Then they have guys. So we're not saying that they don't do it well. And I know they have, Amari Auber is doing well. I think Caden Curry out there is doing well. But overall, like targeting those guys is going to help you win in this new Big Ten. Now key transfers, my guy Lorenzo Styles, got to throw him on here. So he's wide receiver turned cornerback. It looks like he's going to be in the rotation there. Me and Christian think that he just kind of got on his way to go to Ohio State to play corner, but he wants to play wide receiver. So there's something that's going to happen there. Tom Malone, Davison Igbeson, Jihad Carter. I actually like Carter a little bit from Syracuse, 6 foot 185. Came in as a 4-star. He actually came to college as like a 5-star almost, and said certain recruiting sites. But 4-star kid, I really like Carter and what they did there.
Yeah, I think my conspiracy is that Lorenzo does still want to play wide receiver and he wants to be drafted. But if he doesn't, his brother is playing in the slot on that defense, and I think that's a decent way to get on the field. I think the crazy thing though is he was a fine wide receiver last year. Like he was good. It reminds me of the Chip Trayanum transfer, which he's back at running back, and so I wonder if he saw that and said, let me get drafted, please. I would like to get drafted.
Yeah. So, I mean, overall, they filled some needs. I like it. I think Davison as well. Like, he came from Ole Miss. They talked about him. Like, hey, man, that's a big kind of loss when we did the Ole Miss stuff. So that's just something to note there. Impact players, though, here are your guys. And we didn't put on here Sonny Styles, but you could have. Denzel Burke is someone who I think is very solid this year. You know me. You know as long enough. Michael Hall Jr., I think could have a really big impact on that defensive line. I think they need him to have an impact on the defensive line. And if he can kind of pass rush and get in that second part of his game, I think that this will help out that defense a ton.
100%. I mean, the thing about this defense, and this is not something that I've said about Ohio State defenses recently, is you could put any one of their starting players on this impact players graphic, and I think that it would make sense, except for maybe like Jordan Hancock at corner. But like even Josh Proctor, Lathan Ransom, they had their moments last year. Tommy Eichenberg, like I said, I think I had him as a top 10 player when I evaluated him last year. He's just a fantastic middle linebacker. This team, the ceiling will be reached if this defense hits their ceiling. And I think that, all of these dudes have to step up, but I think they have the tools to do so.
Yeah. 100%. And I think that, when we're thinking of this, and I, as a Michigan guy, watches Ohio State all the time, this defense scares me. Like, I think that this defense has pieces now where you're like, oh man, they can make an impact here, right? Like they can really do that. I think of like what Michigan's had the last few years at defensive end or defensive line, like what we've kind of dominated. Ohio State's got that now. And I think that's something to know. And I think it's something to take serious too with this, and with Knowles there, because I think Knowles is a fantastic head coach, or excuse me, defensive coordinator, maybe a head coach one day, but definitely a defensive coordinator. Schedule wise, they're over under or their totals, is 10.5 wins. Overall, Notre Dame, I guess at Notre Dame is going to be a kind of a big game there. Penn State, Wisconsin's in there, Michigan State, Minnesota, Michigan. This isn't an easy schedule by any means. I think that when you're looking at like a Penn State game versus Penn State at home, at least Franklin always chokes at home, or chokes on the road, with Ohio State. Always chokes against Ohio State, doesn't matter. But overall, I think this is a tough schedule. I'm going to say I'll probably have the over on their wins, because I think that they're going to go into Michigan either. Probably undefeated, because I'm a little higher on them than Penn State. But where are you at?
It's tough, man. Penn State's my team this year, and I think Michigan has the tools to be one of the top 4 teams in the country. So those 2 losses make me not want to bet Ohio State this year, because I think this could be a 10-2 team. On the other side of things, I think they sweep pretty handedly across the board. Wisconsin's an interesting one, because now I think their defense should carry them at Wisconsin, but I think Wisconsin has the tools to maybe make their life hard on offense, Ohio State's life hard on offense. But other than that, Penn State and Michigan, it comes down to that, and I think I could see them losing both. I could see them pulling out the Penn State game and losing Michigan, and I could also see them losing to Penn State and then coming back and going to Michigan and winning that at the end of the year. So overall, I just don't want to bet them. That's my answer.
Do you think Ryan Day loses his job if he loses to Michigan?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's no way he loses 3 times in a row. And I know what kind of program they have, but I think that Michigan game is, weighted to 100 times every single other game. And so those 3 losses really, count for like 15 losses in the minds of everyone at Ohio State. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think if he loses one more time, I think he's done, which
All
is
right.
crazy.
I know. Let us know in the comments. What do you guys think? Do you think he's done? Do you think that he would be fired if they lost to Michigan for a third straight year? I think it's up there. I think that he got a little pressure last year after last year's loss, the way they lost. I think it really depends on that. But if they lose to Penn State and Michigan, I think he's in some trouble because of what Ohio State has, and that's just what they've built. You know what I mean? Like losing the Penn State, Michigan for most teams is like, oh wow, okay, we still won 10 games. That's not Ohio State. Ohio State expects national titles at this point, and Day is a little bit on there, like because he came in. Remember, he's on third base. That's what they said about him. So I think that he has a little bit of pressure there. But overall, this team is stacked. Like when we're talking about this, if they figure out the quarterback position, whatever that case may be, I think Devin Brown could be very good. And I think that if he does start, we could be talking about Devin Brown being an interesting kind of draft pick in terms of like his NFL draft future because of his tools and his intangibles. But if it's Kyle McCord, I could say the same thing. He could shoot up and be like a Will Levis type area where, hey, he just passes to Marvin Harrison Jr. That's all you got to do, McCord. Just pass to Marvin Harrison Jr. and make him look good. But overall, I think this team can be a playoff team, but I do think that they're going to have to gel a little bit better. I think coaching is going to be important here. And I think there's going to be a lot of little things they have to do right.
For sure. I think this is one of those teams where I just think it's like doubting Alabama. I feel weird doubting Ohio State in those 2 big matchups. And so
Yeah.
I think we could see them go back to the playoff. This is the first year where I really wish we were at a 12-team playoff already, because I think that there are about 6 teams worthy of those top 4, just looking at Outlook right now. I think if I had to pick the top 4 teams in the country right now, it would include Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State, and Georgia. And then, USC, Texas kind of sitting somewhere there. But overall, it comes down to that Michigan game, and we'll see what happens there. I know who you're pulling for, though.
Yep. We'll see how that goes. We'll see how that turns out. If you've been sitting here for the last 25 episodes of this, we know there's been some out there that have been doing all the episodes. We appreciate you guys. Hopefully you guys all have a fun college football season. Good luck to all your teams out there. We have a lot of fun breaking down these previews, and we're going to have a lot of fun breaking the in-season previews on our Patreon and on here on the channel. So make sure you subscribe before you leave. All Buckeye fans out there, I have one thing to say to you. Go Blue.